Okay, good evening, everyone. And after a long year of giving shiurim on Zoom, apparently we're still zooming into the parsha over here. I thought we would be looking in to the parsha together perhaps tonight. And Be'ez Hashem, I still encourage whoever is living in this vicinity, who's ever not too far away, if you'd like to come join us live and in person. The gateways of society are opening up again. The restaurants have opened, the non-essentials have opened, the parks are open to play at. Certainly the shuls are open to start learning together in person with again. Anyone that would join me, it will be a great simcha to see you here next week, Be'ez Hashem. We're holding over here by PARSHAS TAZRIA. It's a double parsha this week, Tazria Mitzayra. And it's a parsha that focuses in on the sin of lashon hara, of gossip, evil speech, slander about others. So it would almost be impossible to go through a shir tonight on the parsha without talking about the terrible sin of lashon hara. I'd like to start with the pasuk in PARSHAS TAZRIA that speaks about the isolation that a mitzvah, that a leper, someone that is afflicted with these lesions that they receive for speaking lashon hara, what he has to do. And the pasuk says, "Kol yemei she'anega bo," as long as this person is afflicted with his nega, with his affliction, yitma tamei, he is a impure person. And he has to go and sit isolated outside of the machane, outside of the camps of Klal Yisrael. So a person who speaks lashon hara, who ends up getting these lesions of what we call tsaras, English it's leprosy, but it's much more than that. It's a spiritual it's a physical manifestation of these spiritual blemishes that this person has going on inside of him as a result of the slander and the gossip that he speaks. And he has to sit, he has to go and sit in isolation. Now, before we see the Rashis and the rest of the shir, it should be noted that last year, this time, earlier than this time, even when the coronavirus broke out, and the whole world was literally in isolation. Everybody was quarantined and shut down, locked up in our homes. Shuls were closed. We couldn't go to school. All of the above. Many of the Gedolei Yisrael, our sages of our generation, they began to quote this verse. Because this verse, the punishment for being someone who speaks lashon hara is, bada, they're going to go into isolation and be quarantined. And our sages suggested to us that everybody should be baidik, they should examine themselves, and we should see if, in fact, we are careful or careless in the laws of lashon hara, of evil speech and gossip and slander. So now that we are already a year forward and ahead of that, and as we pointed out, people are getting back to shul, people are getting back to normal, masks have fallen off in many places. So although we are losing the isolation and we are no longer badad, we're no longer quarantined by ourselves, Baruch Hashem, nevertheless, we still have an obligation, especially as we see in this week's Parsha, to revisit and examine the Parsha, the ideas of lashon hara, and where it is that we could do better and where we're falling short. So Rashi writes over here, why is the punishment? It's an unusual punishment. We don't find it by any other person who ever became tummy, who becomes impure. Person could become impure for many things. Tummy mace, they touch a corpse. They touch other tummy objects and animals. They have emissions that impurify them. Nobody has an obligation to go and be punished, to separate from all of the machanos, all of the camps of the Jewish people, and sit in quarantine and isolation by themselves. Rashi, really quoting the Gemara, wants to know what is so unique about this impurity, that a person who has spoken lashon hara and received saras, this affliction in return, why do they have to go and sit in total seclusion? So Rashi writes over here, who hivdil b'lashon hara, because of the lashon hara that he spoke, the evil speech, his gossip, He caused separation between a husband and his wife. Maybe he went around and he said something nasty about somebody's wife. He said over words of Lashon Hara. Remember, even if it's true, she's a lousy cook. It's true, she's a lousy cook. She never learned. But it's Lashon Hara because it means you've spoken badly about somebody else. You degraded them. And perhaps this man went around and he was speaking words of Lashon Hara about this other person's wife. And he caused a havdali, he caused a separation between them. Ubein ish l're'ehu. Or maybe he went and he spoke Lashon Hara about another person in the community, about somebody's friend. And because of those words of Lashon Hara that he spoke, the negative speech which is degrading about this individual, even again, if it's true, it's true. He's a miser. Nobody ever saw him give a penny to tzedakah. He's a miser. But he ends up causing a rift now between two people. So therefore, says Rashi, Afhu yibadil, therefore the punishment is mida keneged mida, measure for measure. As you caused a separation between two people, so we are now separating you from the other people that are in the machanas, that are in the camps of Klal Yisrael. And that will be your punishment. You go sit in isolation. You go sit and sequester yourself in quarantine. And you sit there long and hard until you become pure, till you're ready to re-enter the camp. Think to yourself the negative effects of Lashon Hara and what you did. And once that a person begins to think like that, they begin to reframe their view of the koyach hadibur, the power of speech that Hashem has implanted inside of them, then says the Torah, now the leprosy goes away. Now you bring in your karbonos. Now you go to the mikveh. Now you return, son. Return to Machane Yisrael, to the camps of the Jewish people, and become a part of the kehillah, of the community once again. If you are a person who causes division, your punishment is we put you away outside of the camp. If you are a person who causes inclusion, you bring people together, ba'achdus, because of the way that you speak, then we're going to bring you back as well. Why is it that of all of the sins that we find, Lashon Hara is the defining thing in our lives that makes us so lowly and hurts us the way that it does? So much so that the Gemara tells us the following words. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael taught over. Kol misaper Lashon Hara. Anybody who says over Lashon Hara, again, gossip, evil speech, and the like, Magdil avoinais keneged shalosh averos. His sin of Lashon Hara is equivalent and equal to the Gimel Chamaros, to the three big sins that a Jew is forced to give up their life for if they would be threatened into doing it. And what are those sins? Avodah Zarah, idol worship, Vigil Arayis, and illicit relations, Ushvichos Damim, and spilling blood, murdering another person. Says the Gemara, a wondrous statement over here. And all of the Rishonim are trying to deal, what exactly does this mean? But the Gemara says that a person who speaks Lashon Hara, it's tantamount to have committed the three cardinal sins in the Torah. Avodah Zarah, where you bow down and you worship idols. Number two, where you gila arayis, you have relations that are illicit, that the Torah says you're not allowed to have. And thirdly, it's like murder. It is like killing somebody else. How can such a thing be? How is it that saying over Lashon Hara could be something that is considered to be so terrible and so rotten as like the big three? We know in the beginning of creation, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all of the entire universe, the last of the creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made was Adam, was mankind. We are the apex, we're the pinnacle of the entire 6 days of Hashem's creation. He set the stage before us. He brought in the sun and the moon and the stars and the waters and the mountains and the fields and the fruits and the vegetables and the birds and the bees and everything in between. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought it all around. And then, at the end of it all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings in man, Adam. And Adam is graced with something called Tselem Elokim. We might look like, as the scientists will tell us, something to the effect of 96% of our DNA is exactly the same as the monkeys in Africa. 96%. So under a microscope, we might look exactly like an animal. In a picture, or in the way that we act and that we behave, we might not be even better than the animals. We might even be worse than the animals. That might be true as well. But there's something that is inside of a human being which no animal in the entire universe has the privy of receiving. And that is called the Tselem Elokim, the image of God that is in us. What is the image of God? What is that Tselem Elokim? Targum Onkelos writes in the beginning of the Chumash over there on the words Tselem Elokim. He says it is Ruach Memalelo, which means a person has the spirit, the ability to speak. The ability for a person to talk, convey messages, articulate his thoughts, is something that no animal, no matter how sophisticated they are, no matter how intelligent the scientists derive their intelligence in that brain is, they do not have the ability to have a conversation. They can grunt, they can whistle, they can sing, they can chirp, they can make little noises with their fins and their tails, and they can bang on the tree, and everybody knows what that means. But a conversation which is going to express the deepest ideas that that person has inside of them, only a human being is able to do that. Says Onkelos, that's what it means to be created b'Tselem Elokim. That means that the Neshama, which is Tselem Elokim, is the image of God. The Neshama, which is a Chelik Elokam Mimal, it is a portion, a piece of the Rebbeinu Shalom. The way in which the Neshama is going to express itself in this world, the way that I will be able to share the deepest passions and drives and feelings and emotions that are inside of my Neshama, the way that I will take the wisdom of the Torah that I have learned and share that with somebody else, is only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us the mode of communication called Koyach HaDibor, the ability to speak. That which separates us from the rest of creation is that we can talk and we can speak and we can communicate. And no other animal in the world can communicate and talk the way that we do. Why? Because we are Tselem Elokim. We have a Neshama that is lofty, that is heilig, that is holy, that is pure, that is pristine. And it expresses itself through speech. If the Koyach HaDibor, if the power of speech that a person has is the defining characteristic and aspect of our godliness, then if a person will come and they will defile their speech, they will use the matana toiva, the gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, to hurt other people and their lives. They will use their speech to speak degradingly about another human being, especially if they use that speech to put down another Jew, to embarrass, to shame, to cause their reputation to be beyond tarnished. If a person will take the Tselem Elokim, the godliness that is inside of them, and they will destroy it, says the Gemara, you should know that destruction is tantamount to one or all, as the Gemara says, to all of the cardinal sins of Avodah Zarah, Gil Arayah, Shvichas Damim, worshiping idols, having illicit relations, and killing and murdering. The Maharal explains that we find nowhere else in the Torah that if you are threatened with your life, a person comes to you and they say, turn the light on Shabbos, I'm going to kill you. The Torah tells us you turn on that light on Shabbos and you live. Because the Torah wants us to know that Chayeyim, that the Torah wants that we should live and that we should not die. The Torah wants us to be able to have another day of mitzvahs, another life, another year of mitzvahs, another lifetime of mitzvahs, and not to die for that thing. There's 3 sins that a person is threatened with their life, and the Torah tells us, the Gemara explains to us, Yaharig v'al yavor, you must let yourself get killed, and you are not allowed to live. You're not allowed to transgress them. Somebody says to you, I want you to bow down to this idol or else I'm going to kill you. You tell the person, I refuse to bow down to that. I'm going to kill you. Then you'll kill me. I'm not bowing down to that idol. Somebody comes and says, have illicit relations with that woman that the Torah says you're not allowed to be with. I refuse. I'm going to kill you. Till kill me. I'm not going to do it. A person says, look, here's the gun. Shoot this person over and kill them. Otherwise, I'm going to kill you. Says the person, so kill me. I can't do it. Torah says I'm not allowed to do it. Ask the Maharal, what is so intrinsic about these 3 averas, these 3 sins, that in every other sin, it says in the Torah that chai behem, you should live, v'lo yamas behem, you shouldn't die. Which means that if someone tells you transgress Shabbos, transgress kashrus, transgress, don't put on your tefillin today, so you're obligated, you don't do it because you want to live. So tomorrow you'll put on tefillin. Tomorrow you make a bracha on your food. Tomorrow, next week, you keep Shabbos better. But by these 3, they're so terrible, says the Maharal, you have to give up your life for them. And he explains because these 3 cardinal sins, they go against the very fiber of what it means to be a Yid. The very essence of our Neshama is destroyed when a person ends up engaging in one of these 3 mitzvahs. Avodah Zarah is the exact opposite of a Jew. A Jew is maimin ba'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our whole life is believing in Hashem. Amuna, amuna, amuna. Avodah Zarah says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Sayonara, I don't believe in you. Can't do such a thing. Gila Arayis, illicit relations, a Jew prides themselves in our kedusha, in our holiness, in our control of our taivas, of our desires, living to a higher standard. Someone tells you, you go and defile your body right now with this person, or I'm going to kill you. I can't do such a thing. That's my total destruction of myself. They come along and they say, go and kill another person. Murder? Take away a life. Take away a neshama. Who says that my blood is any better than theirs? I can't do such a thing. It would seem to be that the Gemara over here is telling us by the sin of Lashon Hara, that since that the Tselem Elokim of a person, the godliness of a person, is revealed in their speech, it shows up in this world in the way that we communicate the deepest ideas that are in our mind, in our heart, in our soul. You have the Koyach HaDibur, you can daven, you can pray to Hashem, you could learn Torah, you could speak Torah, you could go and give a person a pat on their back and a kind word, and you can make them feel better. You can tell your wife how much you love her with the speech that HaKadosh Baruch has given you. If a person will, and that's the expression of godliness, if a person will take that and they will defile it by ruining people's lives with foul speech, gossip, slander, putting people down, tarnishing their reputation, says the Gemara over here, it is as bad as all 3 of the cardinal sins because it's the destruction of the Jew. It is the upheaval of the neshama. It's the chorban. It is the total obliteration of the tselem elokim that is inside of us. And therefore, says the Torah, go and sit, b'yidei, go and sit by yourself. Think long and hard what you have done. It's like you worshipped idols. Like you had relations that you're not allowed to have. Like you killed another person. And therefore, says the Gemara, how careful a person has to be with the koyach hadibur, with the speech that they have. Because the speech that they have, if they misuse it, they are totally destroying themselves, and yourself is the godliness, is the tselem Elokim that is inside of there. There was a Yid in Eretz Yisrael who one day wasn't feeling so well, and he went to the doctor. They ran a bunch of tests, and they found that he had some unusual disease growing in his skin. So they did a consultation, and they figured out that if they'll just remove this piece of the skin over there, everything should be fine. So they put him on the operating table, and they know exactly where that place is that is contaminated seemingly, and they cut it out of him. And now they believe that this man is going to be fine. A few months goes by, and the truth is the fellow is feeling much better, but he looks at his arm, and he notices once again there's some kind of a lesion, some unusual thing growing on his arm. And he goes back to the doctor, and the doctor says, "That's strange. You have another one of these things. We have to operate and take it out." So once again, they cut out of him this piece of his flesh over here where this lesion, this unusual thing is. And they tell him that everything should be fine. But everything wasn't fine. Lo and behold, month after month, things kept popping up on his skin. And the doctors, not knowing exactly what it was, they just kept removing it one after the other. And already after 5 or 6 times, the man was beginning to get worried. What's going on over here? I know that everything happens, me the connected, me the measure of a measure. What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from me? So he was a ger chassid. He's a chassid in Eretz Yisrael, the ger Rebbe. And he decided that he has to go and he has to visit his Rebbe and he has to ask him, what is the pshat? What's going on over here? So he went to the Rebbe, who at that time was the Pnei Menachem. And the man comes in, he begins pouring out his heart, and he's crying, and he's telling him, I don't know what to do anymore. Every few months, there's another lesion, they cut it out. What's going to be left with in my skin? So the Rebbe looks at this man, and he asks him the following question. He said, at your Shabbos table, do you speak about other people? So the man gets very quiet. And he hangs his head in shame and he said, yes, we do. We speak about other people at the Shabbos table. And the Rebbe says to him, when you speak about those other people at the Shabbos table, do you cut them up with your words? Meaning, do you make fun of them? Do you pick at their lives? Do you put them down? Do you shame them? You say disparaging comments about them? Do you cut them up at your Shabbos table? And with his head still hung down, the man let out a weak reply and he said, yes, we do. So the Rebbe looks at the man and he says, I'm maftiach you, I promise you, that if you will stop speaking slander, lashon hara, about other people at your Shabbos table, and you will stop cutting them up with your disparaging remarks and words, you'll have nothing to worry about anymore. All of your illness and sickness, it's going to go away. You'll be fine. And so the man was makabeli, accepted upon himself and for his family, no more lashon hara by the Shabbos table. No more cutting into people at the Shabbos table, and that carried on to the other areas of his life as well. And he never got a lesion, a disease on his skin again. There was not another surgery. Says the Gemara, you want to destroy yourself? You want to destroy your tselem Elokim? You want to ruin the godliness that is there inside of you? There's an easy way to do it. Just speak lashon hara. Run around, find out information, gossip about this person and that person. Your wife comes home and she's she's outraged at what took place in the store, what took place at school, or what took place in her office. And she begins telling you about this one and that one, and then you're allowed to listen in those cases. She's getting it off her chest. She has no choice. But to respond with words of slander about that person, no, you're not allowed to do such a thing. You're sitting around in a group of people, and suddenly you watch the conversation going from bad to worse. They are getting into such juicy gossip over there. People's eyes are popping out of their head. They're sitting on the edge of their seat. Oh, it's so good. And you know the juiciest, dirtiest detail of this story that nobody else besides you knows. And it's on the tip of your tongue. You just want to share it with that group. You want to make sure they hear everything that you have to say. And oh boy, then will you be the center of attention over here with that juicy information. You're not allowed to say it. If you say it, you are machrif, you're destroying yourself. You're destroying the tzelem Elokim. Avodah zar, gilarai, shvichas damim. You must give up your life. The Rishonim say, you don't have to give up your life. If somebody says, speak Lashon Hara, I'm going to kill you, you're allowed to speak the Lashon Hara. But the idea is the concept over here that Lashon Hara is so terrible that just like those three sins destroy the essence of the Jew, Lashon Hara comes and it destroys literally the essence of the Jew himself. It ruins the Neshama. The Orchos Chaim writes very powerful words. Doas Elokei Avicha. You should know your Elokei Avicha. You should know Elokei Avicha, your God, your Father. Know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And once that you know Hashem, it's an interesting connection over here, we have to understand this. Know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your Father. Once that you know Hashem, your Father, then you need to weigh out your words on the scales of justice. If you know there's a Rebbeinu Shalom, and you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is listening to everything that we say, and you know that you have Tzelem Elokim inside of you, and that is a piece of Hashem himself, and you are empowered to become a person of Ruchnius, of Kedusha, of Dveikis in Hashem, then make sure before you speak, you weigh out your words on the scales of justice. Otherwise, you could destroy your neshama. It should be easier in your eyes to spend your money than to spend your words. It should be easier to give your wife the credit card and tell her, have a spree on Amazon.com. Go for it. Sky's the limit. Than to say one word that is not appropriate for your mouth to say. You could spend money on food. You could spend money at the store. You could spend money on a car. You could remodel your kitchen. You'll get some new floors. Spend that money. It should be, and that's hard sometimes, but it should be easier to spend thousands of dollars than to let one loose word out of your mouth. Upicha al yemaher lahitzi davara. Your mouth should not be quick to release a bad word. Let's call it, in our case, lashon hara, gossip. Until you weighed it out on the scales of your seichel, of your reasoning and your logic. A person is not allowed to say whatever they want. They can't talk all the time. rattling away and away, prattling on and on and on and on. Says the Rosh, Chas v'chalila. You are in control of your speech. And if you don't think before you speak, guaranteed almost that you're going to say the wrong thing. You're in a group of people. Everybody knows what happens when you're in a group of people. You haven't seen your friends in a long time. You get together. Start schmoozing. Hey, how you doing there? Anybody see Johnny over there? How's he doing? Oh, Johnny. I don't even want to tell you what's going on. Oh, well, what's happening? Oh, forget it. It's Lashon Hara. That's the great line. No, it's Lashon Hara. No, it's not Lashon Hara. Come on, just tell us what's going on. Says the Rosh, think before you speak. Because if you don't, you're in big trouble. Says of Haskell Levenstein on these words. Adam hamedaber kol ha'oila ruchai. A person who speaks whatever's on his mind, whatever the wind blows into his head at that moment. He's just ready to shoot the breeze, as they say. Mi bli lachshoiv koidim, without thinking beforehand. Im adiber letoeles imlav. If the words that he's about to say right now are beneficial or not beneficial. Bezehu mafkir es nishmasai, by saying over words whatever is on his mind, whatever is in his mouth, whatever he wants to say, he is mafkir. He makes his nefesh, his soul, ownerless. He's no longer the owner of his neshama. He no longer has control over his neshama, of his soul. His soul is now hefker, it is ownerless, and it belongs to every place else. Ki adibor hu minishmas ha'adam, because our speech is from the neshama of a person. Kemoshe tirgam ha'unklis, like Unklis taught us, as ha'pasik vayhi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, man will be a living soul, leruach memalalo, which means he has the power to be able to speak. Says Rav Levenstein, similar to what we're saying over here. And that is that which makes you who you are is the Tzelem Elokim. The way we express the Tzelem Elokim is with the koyach adibah, the beauty of our speech, all the amazing things that we can talk about. A person who begins to say whatever's on his mind, and he doesn't stop, and he doesn't think, he doesn't weigh it out on the scales. Should I say this or not? Okay, they're all speaking Lashon Hara. Should I really give over that piece of information that I know? Should I roll my eyes right now? Should I nod my head in agreement? Should I do those things? Says Rav Chaskel Leveshin, if you do it, you are mafkin nishmasa, you just lost the ownership rights over your neshama. Your neshama is now all over the place. And it is no longer imbued with the kedusha and the sanctity and the tahara and the purity that it once had, because you have destroyed your Tzelem Elokim. Avodah zarah gilarai shvichas damim, you did it all. How careful a person has to be. And if our mouths are what we are given in order to use for the right things, we have a mouth to speak words of Torah. We have a mouth which makes brachas, blessings, all day long, from the minute that you wake up in the morning. You make a bracha in the morning right away, al netilas yadayim. And before you go to sleep at night, you make a bracha, hamapil, to put yourself to sleep peacefully, that Hashem is going to watch over you. And throughout the day, there's so many blessings that we say, so many words of tefillah, of prayer. Our mouths and those brachas are potent. Those words of tefillah, of prayer, where we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's powerful and strong. They can pierce the sha'arim, the gates in heaven. But if you defile your mouth and you use it for Lashon Hara, and you now begin to be someone that even becomes a Baal Lashon Hara, they speak Lashon Hara constantly. Certain friendships are very conducive for Lashon Hara. Beware of those friendships. Certain people, you know that whenever you are around them, when you go to that house, you know that's all they do is they badmouth people. What happens if you begin using those lips for Lashon Hara? So imagine you have a bottle of clean, pure, triple osmosis from the mountains, dripped from the snow-capped mountains down into the well springs over there, and they purified the water 17 times, and you have this bottle of water in your hand. And it looks so pure, and it looks unbelievable. You can't wait to drink it. And you decide, you know what, you have this piping system in your house. You're gonna put it down the piping system so that it can come right out of the faucet over there, and you'll be able to drink it. So you pour this purest of all waters into these pipes. Now, unbeknownst to you, these pipes are old and rusty and dirty. And you pour the water down the pipes and you turn on the faucet right now and you're waiting for that clean glass of water to come out. And as you see the water, it's dirty, it's yellow, it's brown, it's mucky. And you don't understand. The water was just so pure. It was so clean. What happened over here? You call the plumber, you tell the plumber, what's going on? And the plumber begins examining your pipes and he says, you fool. He says, your pipes are so rusty and they're in such bad shape. You don't put water like that on those pipes. He says, if you want the water clean, you have to get it right from the source. Say our sages in such mashalim, such parables like this. The words of our tefillah, they're pure. The words of Torah, they are pure. The words of brachas that we say, they are pure, as clean as could be. And if your mouth is clean, and your mouth has guarded itself, you've guarded your mouth from saying words of Lashon Hara. So then those words of prayer, they shoot out of your mouth right up to the heavens. Those words of Torah right out of your mouth into the hearts of the people that are listening to you. The words of brachas, of blessings, you're bringing so much bracha onto yourself right out of your pure mouth, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears them all. But let's say that a person is speaking Lashon Hara with that mouth, that kli chemda, that treasure that he has called his mouth, which is the way he's going to express the tzelem Elokim that is there in his life. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if the waters of tefillah and the waters of brachas and the waters of Torah will come out of that filthy, dirty, rusty mouth, I can't even hear your prayers anymore. I don't even understand what to do with those brachas, those blessings that you're trying to say. Your words of Torah thwarted, damaged goods because they came out of a mouth that's filled with rust. And therefore says the Torah in this week's Parsha, how careful, how precise we have to be with our words to make sure that we don't say things that we shouldn't be saying. As the Rosh is writing over here, stop and think to yourself before you let the words fly out of your mouth. And if you weigh them on the scales of righteousness, of justice, and you'll weigh them in the scales of your seichel, of your logical reasoning, and you'll think to yourself, should I not? As the famous statement is, when in doubt, do without. Don't say the words. Because if in fact there's Lashon Hara in there, you're damaging yourself. You're ruining your mouth, you're defiling your mouth. And you are obliterating and destroying the Neshama Elokai Mimal that HaKadosh Baruch has given you, the peace of Hashem that's inside of you. And you're like Hefker, you're like nothing, ownerless. The pasuk says in Koheles, Maves v'chayim b'yad haloshen. Death and life is in the hands of the tongue. Many people misquote this pasuk. They think that it says, Chayim v'maves biyad halashon, life and death is in the hands of the tongue, but it's really the opposite. Maves v'chayim, death and life, is in the hands of the tongue. Ask the Alshich, why does it start with the negative and then the positive? It should be like the mistake that everybody makes. Life and death is in the hands of the tongue. And yet Shlomo Melech, the wisest of all men, he said, no. It's death and then life is in the hands of the tongue. Why do we focus in on the death? And the Alshich explains, because for a person to speak negatively, it's much easier than it is to speak positively. Words of lashon hara can leave a person's mouth much easier than controlling them. The Rosh writes over here, you have to weigh out every single word before you say it. You know how much effort that takes? You know how much time that takes? Half the things you want to say, you can't say anymore. Half the conversations you want to have, you can't have anymore. So it's much easier just to be hefker, just to be ownerless. Let the words fly out. Says Shlomo Melech, you should know though, maves v'chayim biyad halashon, you could kill people with your words. And the person you might kill spiritually is yourself, by the way. That's what we're saying here tonight. And therefore the leper, the Mitzari, as he is exiled from the Machrei, from the camps of Klal Yisrael. He goes and he sits by himself, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, now think. Now stop and think why you're there. What did you do wrong? And if you'll begin to realize, I said the wrong things. I wasn't careful with slander, with gossip, with evil speech. Now that I'm going to go return to Machaneh Yisrael, I'm going to return to the camps of Klal Yisrael. I'm going to be with my family and my friends once again. I have to go back to the office and be with the co-workers. If you walk the streets and you see anybody on their phone, you will probably hear that about 95% of all conversations are lashon hara. He said this and she said that. That's what people are talking about all day long. You go into an office and the boss walks in, he says something, he walks out, and everybody's in their little cubbies over there, they're huddling around. Who does this boss think he is? Says the Torah, no. Before you let the words release from your lips, realize Mave's death is easier than life. But Mi Chavetz Chaim, who is the man who desires life? You want life, don't you? Nitzor l'shoincha meira, guard your tongue from speaking evil. Nitzor, guard it. And you'll have to work. You have to come up with tactics to remove the taiva, the desire that we have to say over lashon hara. You'll have to control yourself again and again and again and again. Yeah, but the benefit is you are zeicha, you merit chayim, you merit life. If you don't guard your tongue, if you don't watch what you say, if you talk bad and nasty and gossip about other people, your mafkir, your neshama, you let the neshama just go flying in the wind. You have no control and no connection anymore to the tzelem elokim, to the godliness that is within you. And your mouth now has become a rusty vessel, which means all of your Torah, all of your tefillah, all of your brachas. Could you imagine a person speaks lashon hara all of his life, but he was also a God-fearing Jew who davened every tefillah. He said every single bracha. He learned Torah hours and hours every single day. And he goes to Shemayim after 120 years. And he's standing there waiting for all of the reward that he's been accruing from all of his davening, his blessings, and his Torah. And he's waiting, let's see. Did I hit the jackpot? Let's see how big it is. And Hashem says, what's your name again? I'm sorry, I have nothing here for you. And the man says, excuse me? I went through Shas 20 times. I never missed a single tefillah all of my life. I said brachas with so much kavanah every single day. I would cry when I said birchas Torah in the morning. What do you mean you have nothing for me? Hashem says, I have nothing for you here. What's your name again? I can't find any of your, there's no bank account, there's no reward, there's nothing here. And the man begins crying, and the Kodesh Baruch says, you fool. Yeah, you davened, and you said brachas, and you learned Torah, but you said it with a mouth that was filthy and rusty, damaged and defiled with Lashon Hara. Guess what? Your words, they never made it up here to Shemayim, to the heavens. Sorry, I have nothing for you. My wife told us over a story this past Shabbos or Yom Tiv. I remember hearing it from her many, many years ago, but she added details that I was completely unaware of. When my wife was in high school, her school went and they took like a 4-month sabbatical, so to speak, to Eretz Yisrael. And maybe 15 of the girls in the class went on this 4-month journey. And they were living there, and they were learning there, and they were mitzvahs, everything. It was a very, very wonderful experience for them. My wife went with really her best friend. And there was another girl that they were friendly with, but she was a little bit annoying. Every time my wife and her friend wanted to go off and be on their own, she would always tag along and follow them. She didn't get the hints how annoying. Let's call this girl Rachel. One night, as the girls are getting ready to go and do some activity, my wife's good friend wasn't feeling well. And she told the administration, I can't go, I need to rest in bed, I don't feel well. And my wife wasn't really up to going on the trip. She didn't want to do this activity. So she said, you know what, I'm going to stay here, I'll take care of my friend. She shouldn't be by herself, I'll take care of her. And they said, fine, no problem, you two stay here. You'll take care of her, you'll help her get better, not a problem. And so the two of them were sitting in their dorm room and they were schmoozing around. And suddenly the topic of Rachel came up. And my wife, who is a tzaddikus and very careful with the things that she says, they got into a conversation about how annoying this young girl was, that she's always tagging around with them. And my wife said, I wish she would just get the point already. She would see that we want to be by ourselves because she's so annoying. She doesn't just leave us alone. And the two of them laughed. And my wife got up and she went to leave the room and she opens the door and lo and behold, Rachel is standing right there by the doorway. She also didn't go on the night activity and she was standing there and she heard everything that my wife said. That, of course, you can imagine is the end of, you don't have to worry about her tagging along anymore for the rest of the summer. That was it. She wants nothing to do with my wife and her friend. And my wife tried to apologize, nothing doing. She was so hurt. She was so offended. It was terrible. This was in 10th grade. They came back from Eretz Yisrael. They went back to school. My wife tried over the rest of high school. Nothing, no friendship, no contact. This girl would not speak to my wife about anything. She was so offended by these words of Lashon Hara. My wife goes to seminary in Eretz Yisrael. This girl went off to seminary somewhere. They bumped into each other once or twice. My wife tried it. Nothing. Now my wife comes back to America. It's time for shidduchim. She's looking to get married. In the back of her head, it's gnawing at her for years and years and years. There's a person in the world that hates her because she spoke Lashon Hara about her. She has to make amends with her. She starts going on shidduchim, doesn't go. This girl is in her school, back here in America. And my wife decides that's it once and for all. I'm going in and I'm asking Mechila forgiveness, and I'm not going to leave her presence until she meichel me, till she forgives me for the Lashon Hara that I spoke years ago. And so my wife wrote a very heartfelt letter to this young lady. and she expressed her remorse that she ever said such terrible things. And she apologized again and again profusely. And she said, please forgive me. I would like to meet with you in person. Please, I need to talk to you and ask you forgiveness. I'm so sorry that I hurt you like that. And she got the letter into this young lady's hands. And the young lady read it. And she called my wife and she said, you can come over. Let's talk face to face. And my wife came in groveling, apologizing, crying. And the girl told her, it's okay. We were all young and immature in 10th grade. We all made mistakes. It's okay. I forgive you. I don't hold any grudges against you. It's okay. And after 10th, 11th, 12th, first year, 5 years, my wife finally had the menuchas hanefesh, the peace of mind, that this young lady had forgiven her for the lashon hara, that she had spoken about it, and she had done her tshuva properly. Not more than 1 week later, after this incident took place, my wife received the call that there's this young man learning in Ner Yisrael named Dovid Horowitz, and we think that it will be a wonderful shidduch for you. The rest is history, as they say. Lashon hara destroys, it divides, it obliterates, it's mafkir, it makes the neshama ownerless. There's nothing there anymore. A person has an obligation to protect the purity of the neshama, the tzelem elokim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has imbued us with. And the way that we perform that protection is by stopping and thinking before we release the words from our mouth. We weigh them on the scales of tzedek, of justice. We weigh them on the scales of our seichel, of our mind. Should I say it? Should I not say it? Will I make someone's life better, or will I cause damage to them as a result of the words that are there? Maves v'chayim biyad haloshin. Death is the death that we can cause with our words, the pain that we can cause with our words, the destruction that we can cause with our words is much closer to us than the chayim, than the life that we can engender in people with our words. But the one, Mi'aisha Chavetz Chaim, the one who loves life, who desires life, he's not Netzor L'Sheincha. He will guard his tongue, Meirah, from speaking evil. It's hard. Who said it's supposed to be easy? But when a person learns to guard and to protect their koyach hadibur, the power of speech, so then they cleanse out the pipes over here of the mouth. And then the words of Torah, straight to Shemayim. The words, the bracha, straight to Shemayim. Our tefillahs, our prayers, straight through the heavens, right to the Kisei HaKavod. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears it all. But if not, rusty, dirty, filthy mouths, your tefillahs, you might as well just keep them to yourself. They ain't going anyplace. Keep your Torah to yourself on your table. It's not going anywhere. You can take your brachas, all the kavanah, you can shuckle back and forth for 5 minutes before you say Baruch. Keep your brachas to yourself because they're not going anyplace. But when a person is mekadesh, they sanctify their mouth. When a person elevates their mouth, and they do that by thinking, stopping to think before they speak, and they want to speak lashon toiva, good words, not bad words. They want to speak words that will be mechazik people, not destroy people. They want to speak words that will bring peace to the world, not that will cause division. Then says the Rebbeinu Shalom, you understand the gift of speech that I've given you. You know what it means to be a Tzelem Elokim? All of your Torah, all of your tefillah, all of your brachas, all your kind words, I take them all, says Hashem. And after 120 years, when you're going to go up to Shemayim, and you wonder what's waiting for you up there, Hashem says, don't worry, I've got a big, big bank account with your name on it. I kept track of every single Shmoneh Esrei, every Birchas HaTorah. I kept track of every single word of Torah that you learned in your whole life. It's all right here. Because your mouth was a pure vessel. We should be Zeichem Yitzhak Hashem, that we take a chizuk from these parshas. It's frightening, the punishments that come to the Mitzorah. To be off in bidud, to be off in seclusion and isolation. We understand what that's like. Some of us have been isolated on top of isolation. We know that it's no fun. Not a walk in the park, being under one roof with the kids all day long. It's not a picnic. It's a struggle. The Mitzorah ended off in bidud all by himself, struggling to come to grips with, look what happens to a person who can't control their mouth. But once that he learned his lesson, and the lesions went away, and the Kohen said, come back. Go bring your korban, go to the mikvah and purify yourself. Come back to Klal Yisrael. Then when the seclusion and the isolation and the quarantine ends, and he becomes a member of Klal Yisrael once again, he does it with peacefulness, with nobility, with beauty, with kind words of speech. And in that zechus im Yetz Hashem, as the Gemara tells us, that the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, because of senseless hatred. The Chavetz Chaim writes in his Hagdam, in his introduction to his masterpiece, Sefer Chavetz Chaim on Lashon Hara, that you should know that sinas chinam and Lashon Hara, they go hand in hand. And therefore, that when the Gemara says that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, senseless hatred, you should know Lashon Hara is the cause of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. If we will work hard to change the way that we speak, which means we have to change the way that we think up here and guard our mouths mirah from speaking bad, then that'll be a tikkun for the sin that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, and we will be zeichem Yetz Hashem to come singing and dancing and schmoozing the way that a Yid is supposed to schmooze, the way that a Yid is supposed to talk in Yerushalayim HaKodesh b'mheira v'yameinu.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Amen.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Have a good
Rabbi.
night, everybody.
You too.